So this second session is about energy crisis and e-infrastructures. And does not work, the remote... So again, the session will be recorded, and I kindly ask you not to activate your microphone and video unless the host gives you the permission. I skip now the introductory part, what is e-IRG, and then I just want to thank again the program committee, Jan Gruntorad, Volker Beckmann, Panos Zagirakis, Stefan Hanslik, Marco Bonac, Jan Libelitz, Fotis Karayanis, Michael Maragakis, and Bernd Saurug. Session 1, Energy Crisis and Infrastructures. Moderator is you, Stefan.
Yes, as you said.
And I give you the floor.
Thank you, Paolo. In this connection, I'm delighted to give you a short description on the session. And as you can read, the current energy crisis as a result of the war, but not only the war, it's also a result of a lack in the energy production in Europe, have an impact on all areas of life, and thus also on research infrastructures. And of course, e-infrastructures, because they're highly dependent on electricity. The increasing cost for operations, high energy prices and inflation, and also maintenance, including rising costs for equipment, need to be better understood and addressed. Projects are different, and the initial approach of research infrastructures and e-infrastructures is to either reduce the operation time, or which has a direct negative impact on research infrastructures, or also taking measures in reducing the production, the energy need itself. So let me then immediately go to our speakers and actors here in the room and also virtually. There is, I'm beginning with the list. There's Sandra Cohen from the University of Athens, and there is Martin Strelek from the University of Pilsen from the Czech Republic, Ula Alas from the University of Taro, and Slaven Mihaljevic as a member of the e-IRG and of SRCE in Croatia. Then there is Jan Ružicka from CESNET, also in the Czech Republic, János Mohacs from e-IRG, as well as from KIFU from Hungary. And we can also see Miriam van Dalen from PSI in Switzerland, as well as Jan Meyer from e-IRG and from SIKT, originated in Norway, and Anna Kalmak Malkoch from e-IRG and from VR from Sweden. So we're delighted to have you all here. And we can then start a little bit late with our speakers. First speaker is Sandra Cohen from Athens. And let me introduce Sandra Cohen to you. I only also have to look it up here. Give me a second. Here you see. I'm very dependent also to the electronics. No, everything is here. Thank you. So I have here. Sorry for that. Sandra Cohen is a professor of accounting in the Department of Business Administration at Athens University of Economics and Business, with a specialization on management, accounting, and public sector accounting. She has participated in several consulting projects for both the private sector and the public sector. She has been a member of the research team in several EC funding projects, and she has worked as an expert for projects for the Council of Europe, expertise, France, and the World Bank. Her research work has been published in several ranked journals and has been presented in several international conferences. So we are delighted to have you here as the first speaker. And yeah, we're looking forward to your presentation about the cost of infrastructures. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Hello, everybody. Is it working? Okay. Hello, everybody. Have a nice afternoon. Very happy to be here with you for the invitation. Thank you very much also for the invitation. As I already told you, I'm happy to be here, even though the topic of is not a very pleasant one. It's about the increased cost of energy in Europe. Oh, here, okay. So before I start my presentation, we had some unexpected issues in the beginning, but okay. So before I start my presentation, I would like to stress that infrastructure, at least in my mind, is an ecosystem that is rather heterogeneous. So on one hand, we have large, very energy-intensive research centers, and on the other hand, we may have some units that are rather dispersed and also hosted in research centers and universities. So what we can see from this slide on the right hand, I have two graphs that show the increase in energy in the last year. And we can see that both gas and electricity have soared. We have at least 100% increase in prices. And this holds true if we take into account inflation, taxation, etc. On the bottom of the slide, we can see that inflation has also impacted Europe a lot. And the main driver for this increase in inflation is energy cost. Again. So in a nutshell, we can see that research infrastructures have recently been impacted by increasing energy cost, inflation, driven mainly by the energy prices, and in parallel, we have significant calls for energy conservation. But what are the effects of these, of energy and inflation on OPEX and CAPEX? We can analyze these effects into direct and indirect, and let me start with the direct effect on OPEX. That is the obvious one. Energy bills go up, we need more resources for the same output, and this is a real outflow. It has a direct effect on the budget. Nevertheless, sometimes this effect is not explicit, and this happens when energy cost of small units is hidden in the host institutions. That means we have some research centers or university hosting these infrastructure units, and they assume the electricity cost. But still, because of the high increase in the prices, this effect has become evident in the budgets of the host institutions. We also have some direct effects on OPEX. Other operating expenses go up. The cost of energy has impacted due to inflation, all the cost of services and maintenance. So again, this is very explicit and it affects budgets. But we also have some indirect effects as well, mainly on CAPEX through inflation. Inflation directly impacts on investment cost. That means if you want to buy new storage devices or hardware devices, the prices would be higher because of the inflation. And we expect also an increase in the cost in the future periods in the future because of decreased depreciation. more expensive investments will be translated into higher yearly depreciation in the future. Last but not least, we shouldn't forget about the cost of capital. Inflation also affects the cost of capital, and the interest rates go up, making the cost of money more expensive. But do we know what is the cost structure of infrastructure in order to make an estimation of the effect of energy cost on their operation? There has been a study about 10 years ago in 2011 called the e-Fiscal study, which it reviewed 28 research centers from 16 countries in order to come up with a structure with their cost structure. And the results were that 15% of the total cost of service provision relates to electricity cost, another 50% for FTEs and 30% for depreciation. And that makes clear that the effect of the energy cost on the operation of infrastructure has been very significant. But what is the flexibility of the different institutions and organizations in dealing with these challenges? The increase in energy prices and inflation is out of the control of the organizations. What the organization can do, to some extent, is to deal with the consumption of energy, and this is related to the calls for energy conservation. So if we move to the energy conservation issue, okay, and we take into consideration that the energy cost is the product of multiplying energy price by consumption, then we can make some reflections on that. So if consumption remains stable and energy prices go up, in order to cover the increased energy cost, we definitely need additional budgets. Or we need discounts in energy prices for specific use. For example, a cap in energy prices for research. Or infrastructures could try to benefit from the policies that the governments apply in order to protect other users, household users. Last but not least, there could be also some cutting down of other costs in order to save resources that could be then driven to cover the additional energy cost. And this type of decisions about cutting down other costs is not always very pleasant. So let's move on with the discussion. Let's move on the discussion about the consumption of energy. Could the consumption of energy be decreased? There are some suggestions here. First of all, there should be more intensity in energy efficient operation. For example, reuse of energy for other purposes. And some energy conservation regarding the use of infrastructure. For example, turning off devices when they are not in use. But also energy conservation has to do with the simple habits of ordinary people in relation to operations. For example, setting the thermostats lower during the winter or using sunlight. The most radical action in order to decrease consumption would be cutting down activity. So cutting down activity may have a lot of implications. I cannot change the slide. May have a lot of implications, both cost-wise and also in research. I don't want to touch upon the research implication because you are experts on that. I would like to discuss a little bit about the effect of cutting down activity in relation to cost. Cutting down activity and volume due to increased energy cost is expected to drive unit costs up. This may sound counterintuitive, but there is a good explanation for that. Usually, personnel cost and yearly depreciation of infrastructure are fixed costs and correspond to committed resources. So if these fixed costs are allocated to a smaller denominator, then the cost of the fraction would go up. In other words, the unit cost would be higher. And it's not only that, it is also that committed resources would be underutilized, that it's also an issue that is not welcome or something that the infrastructure would like to happen, to have idle resources. And the fact that service costs go up is not evident in the budgets because the budgets focus on the outflows and not on the unit costs. So can we make some actions in order to improve the energy cost? Can we manage it? I could split this discussion in two parts, the short term and the long term. The easy things have to do with the energy savings, more conscious energy use, and this could be very much helped by providing feedback to users, feedback on energy consumption in order for them to keep track of the energy used. And that may also lead to some behavioral change. Another helpful issue could be scenario planning, performing some estimation of the expected energy cost based on alternative levels of consumption and energy price levels. Something that is not that easy is also related with changes in the business model in order to avoid energy cost. That means that some not very efficient units could try to use centralized cost-efficient cloud or other services in order exactly not to use that much energy. But this is about the short term. What about the long term? This change in habits should be translated in a more permanent behavior that is related to responsible consumption. But we need innovations. I think the innovations is something that has been already discussed in the first session. We need innovation in energy efficient devices, hardware storage that consume less energy, and also how the energy could be reused for cooling and heating. And why not making infrastructure greener in terms of the volume and the type of energy consumed? So, yeah. Oh, okay. Nobody told me that I have to point there. So, can we use this crisis as an opportunity, like the COVID crisis, try to find out some positive aspects coming out of it? Could we use this crisis as an opportunity to make infrastructure more financially and environmentally sustainable? First of all, this could be an opportunity to improve the relation among the capacity utilization of infrastructure, the cost of resources, and the output. And this needs more energy efficient devices and operations in order to achieve some cost savings. In this realm, it would be useful to set up some cost accounting systems for monitoring cost and output. And this is not only about energy, and I will come back to that in a moment. But also this is an opportunity to make infrastructure more environmentally sustainable and have a positive contribution and footprint to the climate change. Greener types of energy used, for example, could these infrastructures consume energy they produce themselves through renewable sources? For example, if they apply some solar electricity panels, greener types of infrastructure that are more cost effective and energy consuming, as already mentioned, reuse of energy, but all these aspects need for green investments, funding for these investments, but above all, they want supporting policies in order to be achieved. So let me conclude my presentation with a few words about the way cost accounting could help in order to could help this discussion. Let's talk about data information needs. Cost accounting information is useful for decision making, and it's also useful in order to cultivate cost consciousness mentality. These systems are needed to gather and process cost information about operations, but they have to be suitable for the context. For example, in infrastructures, and this is experience I had from the e-fiscal project, some resources are not assigned to infrastructures as they are covered by host institutions or they are provided for free. So shouldn't we take into consideration these resources when we calculate the cost? We need new methodologies that are simple and comprehensive enough. And maybe we could capitalize on some good practices that some research centers already apply. So let's clarify something, because sometimes we are afraid of cost. Cost refers to resource consumption, and it provides some indications of efficiency. And we can use this cost information in order to benchmark with peers and with the market. However, it's not only the cost information that matters. Success and value of creation in research, it's not about cost. So cost is not going to substitute issues that refer to research. It's another source of information. Budgets, however, are not enough. Budgets refer to cost outflows. They do not include the whole picture. They do not allow to calculate the cost of existing infrastructure through depreciation. So the suggestion would be to relate output with cost data. In other words, to get a holistic view of resources consumed for a given period. And we have to bear in mind that resources are constrained and another is for free. And cost information would be another piece of information that could be useful for informed policy making. So thank you very much for your attention. And I would be delightful to take some questions at the end of the session. Thank you very much.
Thanks a million for this rather comprehensive and intensive presentation. We've got now about a very fragile economic and scientific problem, but I'm convinced you have also presented some very good solutions for some of these problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So let's come to the next speaker, who is Martin Strelek. He's a senior researcher in the Laboratory for Advanced Power Systems at the University of West Bohemia in Pilsen in Czechia. His professional activities focus on research and the development of novel tools and technologies for power systems and demand-side energy management domain. We has been strongly cooperating with the industrial partners and public sector in the technology transfer from academic domain to real-world one. Please.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you, Sandra, for a beautiful presentation. And I would like to extend your presentation with a technical point of view on same topic. Actually, my presentation will be focused on the energy crisis from point of view of our university and the energy needs which we need to cover, and the energy conservation measures which we have to apply to reduce the energy costs. So at this slide, this is our campus at the university, and in total, we are consuming two major sources, energy sources: district heating and the electricity. Fortunately, in Pilsen, we are supplied by district heat, which is produced by waste, and is very efficient in Pilsen. So we don't have a lot of problems with the heat energy, but we have problems with the rising prices of the electricity, which is about 40% of our energy mix at the university. And of course, we want to reduce the cost for the electricity, because as Sandra showed us, the energy prices in natural gas, the similar situation in the Europe is with the electricity for our segment of consumption. That's mean the non-residential consumers with about 10 gigawatts hour per year consumption. So last year, the energy prices in Czech Republic has been rising a lot, but still in the absolute numbers, we are still below the EU prices. That's one optically positive aspect. However, we are purely exported energy country, and in the relative numbers, we are in our segment one of the most accelerating energy prices country, because the first is Romania, and we are, based on the statistic, the second one. Anyway, in absolute values, the electricity is relatively okay, but in the relative ones, we are facing the significant increase of the electricity prices, about 90%, which is very extreme problem for our public budgets, because our energy prices for the electricity cost is doubled. And of course, there is a huge effort is put on the reduction of these energy costs. As Sandra said, it's not an easy task, and it's not about just the energy savings, because traditionally we just apply the measures for reduce of the energy volume which is consumed by the satisfaction of our comfort needs and requirements. But not always the energy savings are the same as the cost savings. Why? Because energy and the volume which you can spend, and the price which you can get or pay for the electricity is multiplicative, and you can play with both vectors, with the energy in terms of consumption, with the cost in terms of services which you can provide to other stakeholders of the energy systems. Of course, everything begins at the users, and the users has their own needs and have some comfort level which you have to satisfy with your energy infrastructure. The technologies which you have in house represent some let's say ancillary services which provides you generation, distribution, transformation, storage, and the utilization of the energy, and the technologies satisfy your comfort or your requirements which you have. And if you want to achieve the energy savings, you have to reduce your comfort of users, or improve the, let's say, operational or technical quality of the technologies which you deployed on your site. But in the, let's say, at least in the Czech Republic, in the past years, the energy environment is changing, and if you have let's say a relatively good acceptance in the users in terms of comfort, and if you have flexible technologies, you then have to just reduce the electric or energy consumption, but you can, with your active asset, provide some energy services, and you can obtain additional additional costs for some provision. So we considering at least three perspectives which we needs to take into account in terms of application of energy measures. One relates to the users and is mainly connected to user behavior and its change in terms of reduction of comfort, but it's supported by the technology which you have. It should be energy efficient, of course, but it should be effectively operated by some stakeholder to provide services which you can get the money for, and you need the organizational readiness on the top of management level to apply some legal changes or change the procedures at your universities. So that's the reason why if we now are looking for the energy savings measures or cost savings measures, we are considering at least 5 perspectives. The first one is the level of physical devices. That's all the equipment which you have in place, and we are trying to improve its physical qualities, like energy efficiency, some improvement of the flexibility and of course we are looking for some incentives to support the investments in the physical devices. The second part of this story is the operation. If we have efficient equipment, we need to operate all the devices in an optimal manner to satisfy the user comfort and needs and maximize the technical efficiency of that equipment. Of course, we are placed in some legal and regulatory environment which our, let's say, effort should be complied with. And why? Because we want to use our flexibility, our measures on the market as well. From on one side for the optimization of the contracts and tariffs, and on the other hand for active provision of some energy savings. And of course, everything depends on the user behavior, and at the end, the user have to accept these all energy measurements and have to accept reduction of the comfort or some requirements. At our university, we have created an interdisciplinary team, because all these 5 perspectives cannot be done or identified by just electrical engineers or some legal stuff and so on. But we created an interdisciplinary team, and we are working on the development on comprehensive strategy, which will have a short-term view, mid-term and long-term view, which relates to the particular measures which we would like to apply at our university. But the short-term, mid-term and long-term measures have to be let's say synchronized to achieve the maximal efficiency, the cost one. Here it's just one example of one measure which relates to the computation center. We are hosting significant calculation infrastructure, and in our building, in our department, we are hosting the computation cluster, which consumption is about 100 kilowatts. And we need to keep some environment in terms of cooling and then the heating. And this cluster is consuming the electricity and of course as the heat energy. But I would like just talk about the electric part. In the electric part, the classical task is control the temperature in the server room from the HVAC point of view, and this part is relatively efficient in our university. But the calculation and the computation performance is significantly influence the electricity which is consumed by whole cluster. So that means we can control the temperature in the room from our district control, but we have no possibility to limit the consumption coming from the calculation cluster. But these both parts significantly influence our needs for the electricity in terms of capacity payments and in terms of energy, and they are strongly connected, and that's the reason why we cannot distinguish it. But it's an interesting case for us because the computation performance depends on the outside stakeholders as large infrastructure which are computing their tasks in on our environment. So we tried or we consider this use case or the control of the electricity part from the HVAC and the CPU for two tasks. The first task is a peak shaving. That means we would like to move the peak consumption from the peak period to let's say non-peak period, and it will help us to reduce the payments for the capacities. The second use case which we can apply with the control of the HVAC and performance controller is the provision of ancillary services to the system operators. The system operators is maintaining the power grid reliable and secure, and the ancillary services help them to balance the consumption and production. And with the changing consumption, we can provide them those balancing services and get extra payment for that services. What we need to have in place the physical devices, and we have the computation clusters and HVAC system. We need to have some operation procedures, how to control the physical devices. What we need more, the legislation and the regulatory framework. In the first use case, the peak shaving, we are compliant with the current legislation. In the second one, the provision of ancillary services in the upcoming legislation, we will be okay. But what we need is clarify some relationships between key stakeholders in this ecosystem as a infrastructure operator, building operator, and the users as well. But for us in this use case was the key and the functionality was the ability to modify the power consumed by the cluster by the frequency limitation, and we performed one small scale test just to see how much energy is in that part, and how flexible can we be if we will control the CPU frequency. And we perform a small scale test just to make a proof of concept, and we put in place some measurement, some instrumentation, and we complemented it by the data coming just from the equipment. And we perform several times oriented tests experiments where we reduce it or where we limit the frequency of the CPUs, and we check the actual consumption under 100 CPU usage. And as you can see on this graph in the lower left corner, there is a consumed power by this cluster, the small part of the cluster. And as you can see, the energy consumption is significantly lower when you reduce the CPU's frequency, which is logical. But for us, the good aspect is that the transient time is just 4 seconds for change of the power consumption. From this part, we get 2 relationships. One relationship is the dependency of the consumed power on the frequency of CPUs, and here this is the graph on the top. And as you can see, you can reduce just 17% of frequency, and you will get more than 30% reduction in the power. Similar graph you can see below. That's the temperature dependence on the frequency, and is let's say exponential as well. So that means you have some significant significantly sensitive part on the higher frequencies, and let's say non-sensitive part on the lower frequencies. For us, it was a claim that with our infrastructure current, we can easily achieve the peak shaving scenario, and we can easily reduce the frequency of the CPUs and reduce the consumption during the peak period. But what was more interesting for us is it was the provision of the ancillary services. As you can see, we have a transient 4 seconds, and which is quite important for the TSOs, for some kind of balancing services, as a frequency control service or automatic frequency control, which are really demanded on the transient times. So that's mean the both use cases are, from the technical point of view, durable from our side. But what we are missing on the side of ancillary services is the relationship between particular stakeholders. That's mean the market arrangement. But fortunately, we are at the university, and we are running several research projects where we can discuss this topic with our stakeholders like DSOs, TSOs, and so on. As a conclusion, it's a similar to conclusion which has Sandra. So the energy crisis is significantly impacting our energy budgets. But personally, I see it's not a good thing, but I see it's a really good opportunity to innovate our procedures, our processes, technologies, and so on, because with these prices, more cost savings measures have positive business case, and that's really important for our departments. And the implementation of the measures mainly depends on the internal factors as a user acceptance. Fortunately, we are at the university, and it's easier. The technical properties and possibilities of the equipment in terms of operation and the energy efficiency and organizational readiness of the university. Of course, the external factors we cannot strongly influence, but many measures depends on the investment incentives and on enabling of legal and market environment and other measures. But the energy measures which we would like to implement are ranging from the easy one to complex one, and the easy measures depends mainly on the investments, but the complex ones depends on the synchronization and holistic view of the whole ecosystem. Thank you for your attention. So, yes.
Thank you very much for your very detailed explanation about solutions from the technical side. Let me go to the next speaker, because we're running out of time, and therefore I would also remind you if it is possible for you to keep the 5 to 7 minute slot for your talk. And I would like to welcome Ulla Alles. Ulla Alles works at the Institute of Computer Science and the High Performance Computing Center of the University of Tartu. Welcome. Please come. Yeah, you can stay if you want, or you can go if it's better for you. How you like it? Thank you. Please.
Thank you. Hello. Hello, everyone. My name is Ulla Alles. Thank you for this opportunity to attend this event and also give a short presentation. I am from Estonia. I work at the High Performance Computing Center of the University of Tartu. And my intention today is to give a really short 5 up to 7 minute overview of how the ongoing energy crisis is affecting the activities of our HPC center. How can I, okay. First of all, let's take a look at the map of Estonia. In Estonia, we have 3 major HPC service providers, 3 HPC centers. 2 of them are located in Tallinn, which is the capital of the country, and the 3rd one is located in Tartu, which happens to be also my hometown. And all those 3 HPC centers have a lot in common. They have to face similar issues, and yes, one of those issues is the high energy price. This figure shows the average electricity price in Estonia in the time frame from March 2021 until October 2022. As you can see, the electricity price started to rise in June 2021, so much earlier actually than the war in Ukraine started. So we do not see the very clear connection here between the war and the increase in electricity price. There are other reasons as well. In Estonia, the main reasons for high electricity price are high carbon dioxide emission charges and a lack of capacity for producing cheaper electricity in the region. We can see that the most horrible month was August 2022, when the average electricity price was more than 40 cents per kilowatt hour. Currently, the price is lower again, but the winter is coming and we do not know what is going to happen in winter. Just a couple of facts about our HPC center. Our HPC center at the University of Tartu was established in 2009, and today we are the largest HPC center in the Baltics. We have around 30 employees, and our services are open to almost everybody, for scientists, for privately owned companies, for industry, SMEs, and also for the public sector. We host and operate 2 computer clusters. One of them is called Rocket, and the second one is called Atlas. And yes, you are right, these computer clusters consume a lot of energy. Now let's get more specific. This graph shows how much energy we actually have consumed in the time frame from March 2021 until October 2022. The green line shows the total consumption, total energy consumption of the 2 computer clusters. In November 2021, we realized that it's time to act and it's time to do something to save on energy. Otherwise, our life is getting very expensive and very difficult. And what we did was actually very simple. We see that one of the computer clusters, the Atlas cluster, is consuming much more energy than the other one. So what we did, we just systematically started to switch off the parts of the Atlas cluster which were not currently in use. And such simple optimization really worked. The energy consumption dropped down by 20%. However, in general, our HPC center still consumes about the same amount of energy as 150 average Estonian households. There are some facts that Estonian HPC centers need to consider. First, the price of electricity is formed on the stock market, on the stock exchange, and really can't do anything about it. We have to accept those rules there. Second, there is no hope that Estonian HPC centers will get any financial support from the government. So we have to manage somehow, but how can we manage? Should we increase service prices? Why not? Estonia has the highest inflation rate in Europe. Our inflation rate is almost 25%. So I think it's really good time to increase prices. We all understand that the future belongs to the green technologies. But how can we make HPC technology greener and more eco-friendly? I think we certainly need new solutions. We know that all the HPC systems generate a lot of heat while they are working. Maybe there is something we can do with that heat. A good example here is Lumi supercomputer that is located in Finland. We are also, Estonia is also a member of Lumi consortium, and we also provide access to that computer system. The heat that Lumi generates is used to heat the city. A very good idea. So HPC centers could actually sell that heat that they are producing and make some money with it. But yes, I agree totally with with the previous speakers that the current energy crisis forces us to think how to save energy and forces us to develop more new eco-friendly technology and solutions. Thanks a lot for your listening.
Thank you very much for this very short and precise view also into the Estonian situation, especially when it comes to the connection to Lumi. Thank you. This gives me the opportunity to introduce you the next speaker, which is Slaven Mihalievich, who is the head of the Cooperation and Communicational Department at the University of Zagreb, University Computing Center, the SRCE. Thank you for coming. And you have the words.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be here today and present you the case of University Computing Center SRCE in Croatia. Just a little bit of context so you can understand what SRCE is, and it will be connected then to the rest of the presentation and the energy crisis. So we are the major e-infrastructure provider in Croatia, and for more than 50 years we have been providing services to researchers, to academic community, mainly in the field of storage, HPC resources, information systems, but we also provide a lot of educational services to our users. And we have a lot of international projects, building bridges with the international community. So we are considered as a major player when it comes to digital transformation of science, research, and higher education in Croatia. So most recently, what we did is we are near the finish of one really huge strategic project in Croatia, which is called Croatian Scientific and Educational Cloud. For the last 5 years and even more, we've been building data centers all across Croatia. So right now there are 5 data centers in 5 major cities, in 4 major cities in Croatia. The data centers are finished. They were finished this year, but the HPC equipment is being installed right now, and it will be operational in next year. And this project is a good example of energy crisis, but also of the increase of the prices that were mentioned already today, because of this increase of the prices, we had to delay our project, and we couldn't finish all the tenders that we were planning to have because of the increase of the prices and the amount of money basically that we had on the project. But anyway, the data centers are up and running. Not all equipment is already installed, but it will be during the next year. So regarding the energy crisis, what we had in Croatia was a huge increase in prices of electrical energy which happened somewhere around April. And what our government did to tackle this increase in prices was that they came up with this really comprehensive and huge package of measures that were aimed basically to all parts of society, not only the research, not only the science, not only the public institutions, but also the economy was in this package. And talking precisely about the science, the public institutions, what the government did was they basically limited the price of electricity. So for the price is limited right now for all public institutions, including universities, including research institutes. This is all fine and well, but it will not last forever, of course, because the package is in force until the end of March next year. So right now it's good, but it will not be that for a long time. Okay, so on this graph you can see the energy consumption of our 5 data centers that we are handling in CERCE. The data is from the March this year because the data centers were established somewhere around that time. And the last data that we have is for the October. So as you can see, the red bars are the consumption of energy. The blue are the prices or the total amount of money that we are paying for these prices. As I mentioned, there was a huge increase, almost 40% of the price of the electrical energy. And then the total consumption in October was, as you can see here. And then the interesting part is here. So the green line presents the amount that we are actually paying in October, which is much lower than the blue one. The blue one is expected prices or the cost that we were supposed to pay if the government measures were not in place. So basically, almost half of the cost right now is covered by the government, because in Croatia, the government pays all the expenses for public institutions in Croatia, and this includes the hospitals, the research institutes, universities. So everything that's public, it's the cost is covered by the government. So actually, we are paying less now when we compare our consumption and the prices. That we are paying less than even before the price increase. But so what the government did is they increased the budget, and they did a reallocation of the budget, the national budget. So all public institutions got more money to pay to cover the costs. And so far, thankfully, we had no impact on our operations. So we didn't have to turn off anything or reduce our services. So everything is working as before. But of course, the big question is what will happen after the March, because our consumption will go up because the new resources will be installed and the consumption will be much higher than it is today. And of course, it is not sustainable for our government to cover the costs after or for a long period of time, because the budget of the state budget cannot take so much extra expenses. So there are some discussions how to use the funds that are available for the country, and how to use them for alternative sources of energy or solar or something. But this is of course not any quick solution. And what we as a major infrastructure provider in Croatia believe, and this is our position, that we are basically standing on, that if we are a public institution and if we offer public services, then the cost should be covered by the state, and this is something that we are we are discussing with the ministry right now, so that even after the March, they find some way to cover our costs. But of course, I believe that, and as we have heard so far today, some measures on our side will also have to be taken to reduce consumption and to find alternative sources. And the last thing, and this has been stated before today, we believe, and this is our mantra basically, that infrastructure is the solution, not the problem or not the expense. And as we have heard, the infrastructure will find some ways to deal with this energy crisis, which can then, of course, could be used in other areas. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the Croatian point of view, or the situation, which was rather interesting also because it's in some cases also comparable with our little Austrian one. But let me go to the next speaker, who is Jan Ružička, who is the deputy head for infrastructures at the Czech NREN CESNET. Welcome, and
well, I'm quite used to shout a bit. You have to wait till the slides are set to full screen. Yeah. And shared. Okay. Well, to start with, Infra CZ, which is an operator of Czech infrastructure, consists of three organizations. CESNET is one of them, it's for former NREN, but we have quite a broad service level portfolio, let's say. We also cooperate very widely with GEAN, with EGI, Euro HPC, EOSC, and many more others. You can see in the map how much distributed our resources and resources of our partners through the country. To give you some numbers, the prices were something like 11 euro cents per kilowatt hour formerly, now are almost 30 euro cents with price caps. There's governmental guaranteed price that luckily goes also for the universities. So we are in the same level. Our computational part, which is called Metacentrum, is mailing grid and cloud service, operates something like almost 200 kilowatt IT resources, and we expect that the prices for the next year will reach 700,000 euros. The next big thing is our distributed self-storage, which will consume something like 600,000 euros per year. To give you a comparison, one of the large research universities in the country consumes, with the older prices, something like 8.5 million euros in energy. So it's important to mention that the mentioned kilowatts for IT in the computational part, it's just for our own resources, and the Metacentrum operates also the resources of the users and binds them together to the same planning software and same environment. So almost the same amount of energy and money and everything goes from the community itself as a part of this grid system. So what should we do? Obviously, the clean computing is one of the answers. Right now, we are looking into the categories of software that the users are using in their computations. It seems that there are really major types of software that behaves almost the same. So we should look more deeply into how it could be assigned to energy consumption. And the next thing would be also how to match it better to the hardware and software that we have and we could have. We should not limit it just to a CPU power, but GPUs are also very hungry. We have some on that side. We have some clusters that are using rather smaller GPUs, and we should compare it how it behaves if you use larger amounts of smaller GPUs. Definitely, there will be a big movement back into the RISC architecture, either in terms of the processors itself or in terms of the accelerators. So if you can offload some portions of the CPU task to the dedicated hardware, and I think we should stimulate back the research and development of the new algorithms, because it looks like that the groups are using the same method and same algorithms for 10 years and more, and maybe there should be some step forward, which definitely needs a large portion of user support and dedicated and very well skilled user support. It's not just limited to the computational and storage part. We are right now completing our network upgrade, which actually brings the use of smaller boxes. We abandoned the large chassis and rather distributing the task between the smaller boxes, and we will be adding the boxes if the additional ports and power is necessary. Several times there were mentions also the service ecosystem, the electricity distribution system, peak hours and price per hour. We definitely should be able to react to the peak hours of the electricity ecosystems. Hopefully, we will find a way how to get the information even dynamically from distribution companies, so we could avoid the situation where we have to shut down parts of our systems. On the other side, the grid is distributed around the country, so even if we shut down one node, the others will still continue to operate. Well, 7 minutes were quite fast. So there are some more tasks. Definitely, we have to change the way how we plan the task to match better the task to the resources that we have. So in the peak hours, we rather limit the CPU hungry task and use some RAM-based operations and other ways how to limit the consumption. My colleague showed that even some limitations on the CPU frequency could have an interesting impact. On the other side, it means that you have the right version of the processors that can react quite quickly and make rather small steps with the CPU frequency, because you rather don't want to interact with the user experience that much. But even the slight change could bring reasonable outcomes. Yeah, well, I think I will go to the final slides to spare some time. So definitely, the large centers have their bigger effect, and especially as the colleagues from Northern Europe countries shows their a good way how to build the data centers in the Nordics, in the snow, where they have local energy resources and they can cool the systems very efficiently and even heat the nearby towns. We see that even the distributed computing and storage infrastructure has to react on the situation, and there are options how to do that. And definitely, we will have to clearly look at the costs versus the benefits of such system, because even just adding new power meters and PDUs with per socket metering means quite a significant expenses, and just not add new hardware without thinking of the price and the impact. And definitely, as I said before, it will be a large portion of the educational and support of the users to use advanced techniques, better techniques, new software, and new stuff. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very good presentation. We'll take up most of the outcomes then after we had our presentations. So let me then come to the next speaker. It's János Mohácsi. He is the International Research and Development Officer of the Hungarian Government Information Technology Development Agency, the KIFU. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Again, please Control L if it's possible. Okay, thank you. So I briefly introduce what we are doing. KIFU is the major infrastructure provider in Hungary. So we have a backbone network infrastructure, but okay. And we are serving almost 1.5 million users. We are also serving the primary and secondary schools. And this is the service portfolio of KIFU. We are providing network services, cloud services, supercomputing, consulting and expert services. And also we have some kind of bundled services for a specific sector. The SchoolNet program for the primary and secondary schools is bundling several of our services, and also licenses for all the education. We are providing licensing services, and also some bundled services for National Library and also for some other systems that is described there as specific services. What I want to mention, that's the HPC center that is currently to be started in this year. We have already the test running. The test users are already started to use this Commodore system. The Commodore is a breed of a dog that is a faithful dog, and that's why we call it Commodore or HPC system. So we have 4 partition and we try to make it as modular as possible, our system. What is important, and I also want to mention the situation in energy in Hungary. The electricity prices are increased quite considerably in the past year, not related to the Ukrainian-Russian war, but much earlier. Not only the electricity, but also the gas and the district heating as well. As you can see, that there is not a very stable increase, I would say, because several regions has different prices. There is a capped prices for the households, but not for the enterprises, and even not for the governmental organizations. So different from the Croatian setup. So basically, we will face some kind of shock therapy in the governmental organizations. So the non-profit organizations should also able to somehow resolve the energy situations. So we have, and we are planning to have a long-term energy supply contracts. That means we have several data centers, and we have some of them a long-term contract, and we are negotiating at the moment for the third one. That we have the 3 major data centers, and of course we have to make our systems more energy efficient. So what are the situation with the energy efficiency? We always evaluated our public procurement, the energy consumption. We time to time ruled out certain devices that is too energy hungry, and therefore we want to be more energy conscious during our procurement. We started the billing analysis, as you could see, similarly to the other universities or infrastructure providers. We have to move somehow to the new energy efficient devices, and we are also measuring somehow the power efficiency of our devices. And you can see there are some future steps we want to take. So we are also want to collect more power information, and also we are developing a sustainability plan for some kind of greenery infrastructure. Some concrete information that can be somehow contribute to the discussion. So as you could see, we had a partitionable HPC system. So we are planning to, and we started to implement a dynamic scaling system for our HPC capacity, and we can reduce some energy for using that one. We are phasing out the old HPC systems. Also, we somehow can reduce the cloud capacity requirements because there are no need to run all the core and the storage nodes in our cloud environment. And also, we started to somehow reduce the redundancy of certain systems. That's a very time-consuming thing. We have to carefully architecturally plan what to do and what can be done without sacrificing the current operational service level. But of course, if there is a failure, then there is a devastating effort. Sorry, devastating effect. Also, we are changing the architecture in our cloud services, multimedia services. Also, we are switching off the aging tape systems, but that requires some kind of service migration. And we started to think about some kind of investment for renewing our UPS system, and also renew our cooling with innovative thermal storage system with the cooling. That's quite interesting because with the new energy prices, we have a calculation that the investment will return in 2 or 3 years time. So that's very promising for us. And also, as Jan also mentioned, Jan Jaruzic at Chestnut, that we have to also improve our network equipments. So that also requires some kind of investment, but we will increase also the capacity of our devices. Unfortunately, this is the old slide, but doesn't really matter. I wanted to mention also for the energy savings, new policies. It's a kind of changes in the past. Not only we don't have just this kind of energy crisis, but we had also already the COVID crisis. That somehow changed the behavior of our users and our staff as well. So basically, the home office usage tend to be quite widespread, and therefore we started to reduce the office space, and also I would say we reduced 40% of our office space, and so we don't have to pay for heating for those office spaces, but also in the same time 50% of their time our staff can work from home. So that basically we can reduce this way the energy usage at the offices. And for the next slide, we have a concrete plan for the green data center. So that's the HPC center that is installed in Debrecen. Earlier, when the energy prices was not very high, I would say, the university where we have this data center wasn't interested about using the waste energy because it's a hot water cooled HPC system. But nowadays they started to interested in using our waste heat to heat the swimming pool of the campus. So, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Janos, for this very detailed approach to solutions, like the others did. And let me come to our next speaker. It is Miriam van Dalen, who is currently Director of the Communications at the Paul Scherrer Institute. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction and for inviting me to this meeting. I speak here on behalf of LEAPS, which is the League of Accelerator-Based Photon Sources. And oh, wait. This here. Oops. Yes. So what is LEAPS? LEAPS is a consortium in Europe of 19 facilities, 16 institutions in 10 countries. And we are a consortium of synchrotrons and free electron lasers. We have 300 operating end stations, and we serve users with 1 million hours of beam time a year. We produce 5,000 publications, create spin-off companies, and have more than 35,000 users. And we have a construction and operation budget of 800 million euros a year. So these instruments, in LEAPS, so these accelerator-based photon sources are the result of 400 years of discoveries, and they are engines of discovery. So what can we do with these machines, which are big research infrastructures, but basically you can also say they are giant microscopes, and they can tackle societal challenges. And we do, so we have advanced instruments for basic and applied sciences. We do analysis of physical, chemical, and biological materials. We do modification of physical, chemical, and biological properties of matter. We do targeted drug design and work on environmental research and energy research. So we serve a big, different topical researchers. And we can image things on all lengths and time scales. And here you see the ISRF in Grenoble, which is it's an S3 infrastructure, a landmark, part of LEAPS, and just had an upgrade which made it a more brilliant source, and can do experiments into atomic and molecular scale in a very very innovative matter. So you were before speaking with the HPC centers about kilowatt hours a year. We are consuming gigawatt hours a year, and it's not that we're proud of it, but this is the case. So if you look at CERN, for example, so CERN consumes 1,300 gigawatt hours a year, and DAISY, which is one of our LEAPS facilities in Germany, in comparison has 153. A PSI, where I work, has energy consumption of 125 gigawatt hours a year. And if you count all the LEAPS facilities, so these 16 facilities of free electron lasers and synchrotrons together, you come around 1,050 gigawatt hours a year, which is huge. And if you look on the lower part of the slide, you see comparisons for France, Spain, and Switzerland, where you see the total consumption in energy of the country, and then compared to the railways. So in Switzerland, for example, it's the SBB with 3,000 kilowatt hours a year. And so there was an article also published in a Swiss newspaper saying that CERN was the biggest consumer of energy in Switzerland, followed by SBB, followed by PSI. So this is really something that is a big concern for us. This energy crisis and the increase of the energy. And as you see here, also there was a statement of Katarina Biscari. She's director of the ALBA synchrotron in Barcelona, and she also said, so for example in Spain, the prices for their energy so the power that they buy is increased by 60%. So you can imagine this is really very, very difficult for our facilities to cope with this and to get this in our budgets. What you also see is there was a workshop, this is not new. So there's an Energy for Sustainable Science workshop, which took place in Grenoble in September. And this is a workshop where our accelerator-based facilities work together and also look into new innovative methods to get down the power consumption of our machines. And so for example, here is one. This is the Swiss light source. We are also doing an upgrade similar to ESRF. And you can see there the beam of this new SLS2 is in red, and of the green one is the machine as it is now. And you see there a human hair going from the left to the right lower part of the picture. And then you see that the beam gets more precise, but it gets much more brilliant. So it has a brilliance of 40% more. And the good thing about it is that while getting a higher brilliance and a better performance of the machine, we are saving power. And we do this by, so here you see this donut, that's the SLS at PSI. And while we will refurbish the machine inside, we will also refurbish the roof and put so photovoltaic on the entire roof, and this will help us to save or to get the power consumption down. The other part is, so with this new machine, we will have a power consumption savior of 35%, and this is partly done. So 5% comes from the photovoltaic on the roof, and the 30% goes down because of new technology. We use different magnets, and these magnets are far more so they consume far less power. So this here you see, so there is On one side, we use more green energy. On the other side, there is also an innovation in the technology that can create this energy savior. So just an example from our Swiss light source. We will start the dark period in October, and then until the end of so October next year, and then we will finish the upgrade until the end of 2024. So here is an example of LEAP's, so LEAP's facility investment plans. And so here you see the table with the investments that are planned from 2022 to 2026. And so if you see what a huge investment we have, so the operation budget already of 800 million euro a year, and then planned investments for upgrade programs. And then if you would say, okay, now due to lack of power or increasing power costs, we have to cut the operation time, then we would really give up our primary task of being an engine of innovation and progress. And the research infrastructures like the LEAPS ones are also an integral part for the solution of the challenges ahead. And this is also what we saw during COVID. So the synchrotrons were very important in solving structures that were needed for this making the vaccines and getting to know more about COVID. So also, if we would shut down parts of our facilities, this would result in cancellation of projects and also harm careers of PhDs and early career researchers, which would not be good for our scientific future. And so what should be done? This is a big question, and we heard already several points today of ideas. So for our research infrastructures like the LEAPS ones, it's very important to stabilize the energy supply, because these research infrastructures really need a long-term planning that is sustainable, affordable, and predictable. So maybe a regulated tariff mechanism for power could be there. And then fluctuations in energy costs make planning difficult and unrealistic, and hampers the scientific progress on the challenges that our society is facing, including also the energy production. So it's also that the innovation really comes from this machine, and if you shut them down because of a lack of energy, you also really stop innovation in that part of research. We are also, apart from this photovoltaic stuff on the roofs of our machines, we are also heating our institution with the cool water of our big accelerators. So there's a lot of innovation going on here already to save energy. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Miriam, for this very detailed view. Also in the eyes of LEAPS, which is very comprehensive for us to hear. And I'll like to go to the next speaker, who is Jan Meyer, who is Senior Advisor on International Strategy at the Norwegian Agency for Shared Services in Education and Research. Welcome. You're very Norwegian. You're Norwegian.
Only
sorry for this.
short airline flight.
Yes. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess I'm the non-energy intermezzo here, and I did some calculations just quickly. It turns out you can generate 1 kilowatt-hour a day by cycling. Times 1 million researchers doesn't put a dent in what we just saw, so that doesn't help. Right. So I'm one of the two co-chairs of the ESG Association Task Force for Financial Sustainability. The other one is Dale Robertson from EGI. And was I too far away? We have just released an interim progress report detailing the first steps towards proposals for financial sustainability in the long run. And the task force doesn't consist of me and Dale alone. There are about 25 people supported by Mr. Bob Jones, our board liaison. So our task force has been tasked with looking at a proposal for long-term financial sustainability of the main EOSC building blocks, the EOSC core, the exchange, and the federation of data as defined in the Fair Lady report. Now, by 2027, I would hope that our collective governments have figured out a way to deal with the energy crisis, because otherwise I'm going to cry. We've mostly been looking at the European level, but obviously when it comes to EOSC, there is a national and an institutional level. And when you're being asked, right, so how are you supposed to finance this EOSC? Then the first question you have to ask yourself is, well, what do you actually have to finance before you can articulate the other two questions? So that's what this interim report focuses on. That's what the task force has been focused on in the last year. If you look at the interim report, just a kind reminder, it reflects the current status of thinking, right? There are no permanent proposals, no final proposals yet. The task force has a mandate that runs out through 2023. And the current report is the basis for a targeted consultation to e-infrastructures, research infrastructures, EU projects, and the steering board. I'll just quickly browse through the report one component at a time. So in order to answer the question of, okay, so what is it that needs to be financed? You need to ask yourself, right, so how do you scope these different components in the context of the financial sustainability context? If you talk to 100 different people, then you get 100 different views of what EOSC is, and that is quite complicated. So you have to kind of like strip away the noise and try to get to the core of what it is that needs to be paid. So if you look at the EOSC core, right, so there is this EOSC vision, Web of Fair Data and Services for Science in Europe, which apparently requires the deployment of a trusted virtual federation, whatever that is, but the general consensus seems to be you need something called an EOSC core. Now, it's a technical underlay with researcher-facing resource that can be federated, integrated, and used. And from a financial point of view, either you have it and then you have an EOSC, or you don't have it and then you don't have an EOSC. So that thing just needs to be paid for. And coincidentally, we have a hunch of what the order of magnitude cost factor is, because apparently you can buy one for less than 35 million euros. We don't know exactly what the cost scalability is going to be over the years, but someone is pretty sure that you can afford it for a period of 3 to 4 years for less than 35 million. Why the less? Well, because the MVE contains more than just the core. It also contains a chunk of compute and storage and some other services. So that at least gives you an indicative number to go by. And once you've accepted the fact that you need the core to have an EOSC, well, then you can argue, look, that's the key thing in order to have this EOSC in Europe, which means that probably the member states and the EC should jointly feel a certain responsibility to actually make sure that that thing is there. And you shouldn't allow it to depend on coincidences, on external streams from third countries, right? So this is really a core responsibility of the member states and the EC jointly, because this is part of, what is it, ERA Action 1, if I don't mistake. Yeah. EOSC core, right, also needs to be a public thing. So that amount of money just needs to be coughed up. And it's not like we're talking about billions or hundreds of millions. This is in order of magnitude, tens of millions. And that shouldn't be that hard to discuss. But financing that core is just one part of the equation, because there is a dynamic between the operational model for EOSC that is chosen, and that is still not clarified, right? It's the Commission that's going to procure the current core. Well, the Commission is not going to operate EOSC. until the end of time. So something obviously needs to change, and there is a governance model attached. And these things influence each other. If you pick a particular governance model, then there are certain things that you can and that you cannot do. Now, there is a process ongoing in the tripartite collaboration, and that was kicked off at the EOSC symposium with a thing called the reflection paper. Those of you who are EOSC members may have seen that. And there are 3 questions posed, as in what governance do we need post-27, what funding sources and tools are required, and do we need to evolve the current operational model. Those discussions will now take place in the tripartite, and then they need to conclude in the next 1 to 2 years, because otherwise there's no more time to put whatever needs to be put in motion, in place, before the next MFF that is launched in, 28, I think. Now, that was the core, just having a quick look at the EOSC exchange, which for many practical purposes is quite interesting for this crowd. So looking at the exchange, now the core had as an advantage that it is reasonably well defined because of all the work that has been done to it, especially in the last years in the EOSC future. The exchange doesn't have that. Opinions of people vary. There are some people that think that it needs to serve as kind of like the central funnel for everything that pays for e-infrastructure in Europe. There are those that say it should be something else. So we try to analyze, right, so what should it be? What seems to be the consensus of the direction that it ought to go in? And what does that mean from a financial sustainability point of view? Again, what are the bits and pieces that you can distinguish here that need money? So there seems to be a general consensus, okay, it needs to be this pan-European marketplace for research services, right? That pops up in several policy documents. There also seems to be this idea that researchers should have the freedom of choice to use the services from the exchange that best fit their problem. And we've heard it articulate a couple of times earlier today. The researchers should have the choice. Well, if you want to get there, well, the current situation doesn't really support that. There's a complex funding landscape. There is this national European funding that is not really strategically aligned, generally. There are exceptions. The grant funding that is often used both on a European and national level actually hinders the sustainability of services. It's easier to get grants to build new stuff than it is to fix the old stuff. And that's a problem. National providers typically do not have a mandate to provide anything outside of their borders. You can do it if you really, really want to, but then the benefit has to be high enough. So in the case of Euro HPC, the benefit is high enough. In other cases, it's pretty clear the benefit has not been high enough because there's a certain amount of hassle involved. And then there are political, legal, policy, and cultural barriers. Consequences of that are that it just doesn't work at this moment. So if that single digital market of research services is something you want, then something needs to change. It doesn't magically happen. So we had a look at, right, what needs to change. If you look at that landscape of that single digital market, then we figured that it by and large consists of 3 major components that have a clearly distinguishable financial sustainability model. So presumably it makes sense to have a portfolio of centrally financed services, a certain amount of certain services. Why do I say certain amount? Well, because it's probably in that respect, it makes sense to have like maybe 10 million, maybe 50 million of compute resources. It probably doesn't make sense to have 1 billion. You have to put a number on that. What the number is then depends on what it is you want to do with that and how much money you're able to cough up. Probably that chunk should be financed in the same way as the core because it kind of like follows the same logic. In the next steps, we have to figure out more precisely, right, why does it make sense to have that selective portfolio? There are a couple of reasons why you might want to have this. And are those reasons then strong enough to actually convince member states to cough up money to finance that? Because you can always argue, currently needs are being met through current service providers. So how do you deal with that? EOSC is supposed to stimulate collaboration, so hence that could be a good argument to have this. right? A second component which behaves differently is access to commercial services. We figured that having access to procurement compliant contracts with research relevant commercial services, that's beneficial. How you then finance those? Well, it can either be direct payment by the users themselves, or you can make them part of those centrally financed services. Conceptually, it doesn't matter, but you do need those agreements in place, and someone has to pay for those exercises. And thanks to the experience we have, we know that costs about 1 to 2 million euros a year per service area. That's what a joint European procurement for about 4,000 or 5,000 institutions costs. And last but not least, there is the brokered not-for-profit services. That's kind of like this dynamic single marketplace where we hope that the best of breed services will bubble to the top. And if you want that, then you actually do need to create remuneration mechanisms that work at scale. Because you're talking about potentially a lot of institutions that offer services to a lot of institutions. Some questions that have not been answered yet. Who is the customer? Right? Who is actually this magical e-IRG user? Is it the physicists that have already been serviced pretty well for the last 40 years? Is it the long tail of science that in the last decade all of a sudden has exactly the same technology stack as the previous HPC users only had? Right? So that's a question that has been left unanswered. Another one is, what is the channel to that customer? Is it directly serving that user from a central portal? Is it going through the existing delivery chains that have been built up for the last 30 years? Don't know, but what we do know is that what you need to have centrally to support that exchange is quite different in both cases. And there's probably not sufficient funding to support both, or sufficient talent for that matter. If you buy into that vision, then here is a list of things that needs to be in place, right? Mandates, political funding choices, right? Centrally financed services means that maybe Norwegian money has to actually go to French services. Well, that doesn't really happen at the moment because we throw it to Finland, but that aside. Current providers have an incentive to basically keep things national. Again, because of the mandate, but also because that's where our users are. There is something of a procurement and VAT challenge. The VAT challenge may be easier than the procurement one. It boils down to, why can my institutions buy from me? Well, that's because we're kind of like in a long-term collaboration for shared service delivery. I don't have that relationship with a Greek university. Hence, the procurement law says no. You can work around that, but if you want to do that at the scale of e-IRG, you have to think carefully through how that works. And there's a couple more. I realize that I'm using up time. Last but not least, there is the data federation. This is the thing that we understand least. The exchange in there, it's pretty clear. What we do know with the data federation, we've looked at a couple of use cases from several European data RIs. The cost associated with federating data, as in the verification or making it e-IRG compliant, is frequently just not included in the research budgets. So there is a cost incurred by the data infrastructure if they make their data available or provided to others outside of the discipline that they're being funded for. And that's presumably the cost that needs to be recovered. What we have done is look at additional cost categories, as in, okay, so what does e-IRGifying actually mean from the point of view of cost? The data federation is also suffering from a lack of defined architecture. And that's challenging because the different options that we've identified have different costs associated with them. And that makes things difficult. So next steps, the report is now out. There's going to be a consultation, a targeted one. And we hope to have the results of that around January, if it gets launched next week. And then we can work further on particular details of this. In addition, we're going to have a couple of studies hopefully commissioned through a support action project called e-IRG Focus. That's in particular going to look at the details of cross-border VAT and of how to figure out this cross-border procurement free zone. How do we actually make that work? And with that, I am 15 minutes on the dot. Thank you.
Steve, thank you very much for your talk. Stay here for a second, please, because we have a question from the audience, I guess. Can you go back to slide number 9, just for a second? if it is possible. Because I had an energy problem at the moment. I ran out.
An energy
Yeah, I ran out of electricity. And it was about the current situation and the consequences you've presented. Exactly. Yeah. We had it the previous one. Yes, please. Let me ask the question: how to address the problem in concrete here? Because you had said there are some consequences, but how to solve? How much? Yeah.
Well, that's how we landed at that. So we're figuring that if you want to get rid.
This one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Nope. So we figured that if you want to go from the current situation and you don't want to have those consequences, that probably this seems like a reasonable approach, but it's not going to be easy, right? That little bit where it says brokered not-for-profit services, that's effectively building up a marketplace. And then it depends on the complexity of how far you want to go. There are 1 million researchers in public sector Europe, by and large, in Horizon Europe associated countries and the EU. Spread out across, depending on the statistics you look at, it's something like 4,000 to 5,000 research performing institutions. If you want to enable all the 5,000 to potentially become service providers, then you need a marketplace engine that supports that. And that means that a Norwegian institution should be able to deliver a service to a Greek one, and they don't really know each other yet. And they have to trust that the transaction is going to go through, that the financial logistics is going to work, that the contracts are in place, that there is conflict resolution in place. So you need a lot of componentry to make that work, and it cannot be manual, because that doesn't work with 5,000. It becomes easier if you scale it down to 200 e-infras.
I see.
So that's how we figured it could probably work.
The Greek institution.
I can bring it to you, everyone. We have a second one here as well.
I think it's okay. It seems strange to wait. So if you go back, why is this bad? Why is this scheme, the consequences bad? What is happening now is universities, if you think about cloud, universities or national infrastructures are buying their own cloud. If you think about scholarly communication, people buy from Elsevier or from different vendors. Why is it bad? As long as why do we want to centralize to a European marketplace?
So
why is it bad for Greece to buy their own services from a marketplace that we all agree and buy them for Greece? This is what I'm saying. Some of the exchange services, not the core services, the exchange.
No, that would be good, right? If as Greece, you decide to, well, we look at the whole EOS marketplace, and then there are certain things that we would like to purchase as a block.
Yes, unless those services are available in a national portfolio. This is what you said, the current situation and the consequences. Why is this bad if there is a national portfolio?
Because it leads to duplication of services, right? There also is often a long lead time. It also means that if you have a service in Greece that I don't have, then currently the only choice I basically have is to duplicate that.
Or to include it in your portfolio, right? So you buy it from somewhere. So as long as there is a marketplace somewhere that I can discover the service and I can buy it, okay, for my institution, from my country.
Exactly. And that's the point. And at the moment, that marketplace does not exist.
Okay, that I understand. So if there is a marketplace, the current situation of EOS portal, this is what it's trying to do, is put up the marketplace where people can shop around, right?
Yeah.
Okay, it doesn't mean that everyone in Europe has to go and buy the same services. This is what I'm trying to avoid. The next slide.
So what we're pointing out is that there are probably some services that seems to be the thinking of a group of people, that there probably should be a collection of services that you do centrally finance so that they're available for everyone, regardless of the choices that your country or institution makes. I could counter with that, well, if certain countries make choices for building airports rather than e-infrastructure, then maybe they should just suffer the consequences for that. But that's a choice the politicians have to make. But I think you can easily argue that if anyone in the long tail of science would have, say, I don't know, 10 terabytes available for the next couple of years in their research career, and they could be quite sure that they would have that for a 10, 20-year period, that would probably be helpful. So things like that. But this whole dynamic, that would be in that brokered not-for-profit services bit.
Yeah.
And that's where you would get this unpredictable dynamic. And that's where things become interesting.
I agree with you, but that's part of the marketplace. So I think, the choice should be at the institution or the country to buy these services.
But that's the point that I made in what is the channel to the customer. And that has not been, there is no consensus on that. The whole of EOS Future is moving towards the customer is the end researcher.
It's not.
Whereas it could very well be that the end researcher is serviced through a national or an institutional service provider. And if you ask me personally, right, taking off the task force chair hat, if you ask me personally, the only thing that has ever worked so far in the last 40 years is if you actually develop this channel to the customer through maybe a national service provider and then an institutional. That way it works. And having a single portal that delivers stuff to 1 million researchers, I don't buy it personally, but that's not the opinion of the task force because we haven't discussed that yet.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks again. There will be a lot of discussions on this subject later on. We hope on this. We are relying on this. And give me a second. I have to pick up my computer. To be able to announce our next speaker, who is Anna. Sorry. Anna Kalmark. She has a PhD in polymer technology and worked as an associate professor in the material chemistry at the Royal Institute of Technology for 10 years and is now part of the Swedish International Research Infrastructure Group. Let me welcome her. Is she online? Yes, I see her. Hello.
I'm here.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you. Do you have my presentation to share, or do you want me to share it?
Yes, you can share it.
Yeah, I will share it then. Can you see it in presentation mode now?
Very good, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm not sure how much more I have to add to the excellent speakers that has come before me. So I will see if I can just complement on what they have talked about. So obviously, we all know that the research infrastructures are under great pressure due to many colliding circumstances right now. And in Sweden now, the situation with the electricity is, especially in the south of Sweden, getting a bit serious. So the Swedish synchrotron Max 4 recently last week sent out an email saying that if there is a warning for electricity shortage, then they will take their responsibility of basically shutting down user operations and do a controlled shutdown. And we've seen on the news last week as well that parents in Sweden have been asked to bring blankets and flashlights for the kids to preschool. So it's a pretty serious situation. And of course, governments are maybe not so concerned for the research infrastructures when we come to school children not being able to see. So basically what we are seeing, of course, is this increase in costs for running the large research infrastructures for the coming years, which means that there is an increase or an ask for us to increase membership fees on international research infrastructures. And the discussion has been ongoing since this fall, many papers and discussions on this topic. And I guess we will probably have this discussion for many years to come. And as a previous speaker has said, there is a need from the RIs to have the ability to long-term planning. So basically the sustainable, affordable, and predictable energy supply. And now there is an ask to relieve the current financial stress by seeking extra government funding, as well as sort of having this energy price gap for RIs. But there is different governments and different funding agencies have very different situations and different possibilities. As we already heard, the inflation rate is very different in different countries, so it's much graver in some countries than others. We also have this issue with currency that, for example, in Sweden, we have the Swedish krona, but membership fees are paid in local currency, so they are paid in euros. So when currencies are sort of lowering, then there's also that problem to deal with. And as we've seen, some governments have a cap for the price of energy, others do not. We also know that some funding agencies, they get extra money from their governments to cover the inflation rate, others do not. But there's most likely limited ability to meet the needed increase of budgets in the short term to fully cover the increase in costs. So as we've heard tonight, there are different approaches to the increase in costs, and there is a need for basically all research infrastructures to develop contingency plans and also now to activate these. We see across the board savings, which could be decrease in staff, postpone or canceled investments and upgrades. We cancel conferences, events, education and mobility programs. So savings where savings can be made. Decrease in operations, postpone or cancel projects, run at lower power settings, less runtime, and even temporary shutdowns. And also looking over the energy situation, looking into having power purchase agreements where the energy price is fixed for really long periods of time, 15, 20 years, and also a lot of energy saving projects. Now, there are consequences to research and innovations. What they are, we can only predict, but there are the concerns that have been raised here tonight. Of course, because there will be fewer experiments to run, less runtime, then there will be an increased competition to access the research infrastructures, which will mainly affect younger researchers in early careers. So there is a concern for the regrowth of competence. Of course, the quality of the experiments run, we need to consider, especially running at lower powers. And also the fear of capital destruction. Basically, crucial investments may not be able to be done, so we may not be able to keep up the research infrastructures, which may, in fact, destroy them. But on the flip side, then, we hope for these great possibilities to have the push for innovation and technical developments, collaboration between research infrastructures across the field. This is really the time to work together, just like we did with the COVID crisis. The research infrastructures having very similar problems need to really collaborate and look for solutions together to become more energy efficient and more sustainable. And the research infrastructure have an important role to play in solving this problem. They're high-tech facilities with high technical competence amongst the staff, so they have all the possibilities to work on these different issues and to develop sustainable sources of energy. And as we've heard, the recycling of heats, the exchange of parts and materials, for example, cryomodules switch to new superconducting cooling devices. and also use AI to use energy more efficiently. And just to take up one example with CERN and ABB that has been published is that ABB Ability digital solutions to help CERN boost energy efficiency of critical cooling systems. And this is, I think, a nice example of what happens in such crises. It's a non-profit project between ABB and CERN. A partnership will use data insights and expertise to reduce the energy consumption of CERN's cooling and ventilation systems, and it will save up to 15%. They will create digital twins to support online diagnostics and maximize the system's efficiency and reliable operations. And learnings and best practices will be shared publicly so that other large-scale cooling and ventilation projects can find new ways to increase energy efficiency. So this is one way to work together to more efficiently use the energy. I wanted to raise another example, which is the Sesame synchrotron in Jordan. It is the world's first large accelerator to be fully powered by renewable energy. So it's fully powered by solar power plants. It's constructed about 30 kilometers from Sesame. It has a total power capacity of 6.48 megawatts, which will amply satisfy Sesame's needs for several years. So it is the world's first carbon neutral accelerator laboratory, which of course makes Sesame economically as well as environmentally sustainable. And this is most likely the future for research infrastructures. We do need to develop national and international strategies for energy autonomy. And with this, coordination is necessary, and S3 will play an important role here. Is there a need to regulate the tariff for research infrastructures? And the funding agencies most likely has to align in this question in Europe. So looking into the future, we need to think about a few things. And one is, of course, the location of RIs. Normally, they're placed where they're accessible. It's a political, of course, decision where to place these international research infrastructures. But we also need to put another variable into this mix, which is to place them where they are most energy sufficient. So if they need a lot of cooling, they should probably be put into cooler places, and also maybe put into where there's a lot of sun or wind power, so that they can create their own electricity through windmills and solar panels. Really need to think about the recycling of energy and to be transferred back to the grid or used in other parts of the operation. And I really think that the key word here is working together and learn from each other and really coordinate on this question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the last presentation we have had here. As you all know, and also feel by being very exhausted at the moment, we had a very long session, so we also run out of energy at the moment. And I will just briefly sum up what we had the last hours, which was for me the first and rather impressive summary of cases we have through all Europe dealing with the same problem. And the problem we are dealing with is not easy to use, or will not be easy to use, but nevertheless, there are in parts rather valuable solutions which have been presented from our colleagues. And I think they are worth having a much closer look on them. And therefore, I also would assume that one of my take-home messages from today's afternoon is the fact that we should keep on reflecting on this subject, because we have seen it from several points of views. It was from the view of the economic side we had at the beginning. We also had a view from scientists who are working at particular research infrastructures, as well as from the more the side of the user representatives of specific domains in the scientific fields, and all came to the same conclusion, that we have to have a solution for this problem, not only on the side of the scientists, but also on the side of the funders and the corresponding governments who are responsible for using the taxpayers' money, which is used in Europe for keeping these infrastructures and also for giving some kind of sustainability also for the younger careers which are connected to the use of research infrastructures, and also the very strong boundaries to innovation in general, which is for all of us at most importance to also keep this without losing any scientific competition here internationally seen. So I would like to close with this, and also will, as I can you can be sure that there will be also a survey on the energy crisis problematic and the corresponding costs in the next workshop. We will take up this opportunity to maybe come much closer to the solutions. And again, I would like to thank all the panelists who came today and presented from their side the problem and the solutions. Thank you.
So closing remark for today. So thank you all for your contributions. And I'm announcing tomorrow we will start at 10 with data infrastructures and data spaces. In the afternoon, we will then present topics connected to interlinking interaction between data publications and PIDs. So I thank you very much for your resilience and, and again for your contributions. Thank you very much.